back to the podcast. Today is all about how to prepare for a trial. So this might be academy trials, it might be your RTCs and the new version of RTCs that are coming out for the girls. It might be things like the schoolboy trials and things like that, such as Leeds City Boys. But there's just a few things that we could talk about which might help prepare you as a player or your child, where you can talk to them about some of the things to expect, because we've just found in the last few weeks that the people that are going for trials are sometimes left a little bit surprised and a little bit shocked in some cases by the environment and what they walk into. I think they're expecting one thing and sometimes it turns into quite a different thing that they weren't prepared for. So we'll have a little bit of a chat about that today. What we would say with this, particularly for our members, is talk to us. If you need any help in this area, talk to us about it beforehand. And even if you're not a member and you just want some general advice on it, just pick up the phone or drop us an email. We'll be happy to help. So how we've sort of done it is split it into three: before the trial, during the trial, and then afterwards. Trials are different depending on what you're doing and who you go into. Some will be one-off, so it'll be one-off trials, very much okay, you've passed this trial, you're moving on to the next one. That you'll see that a lot for things like the schoolboy trials, in a lot of the girls' RTCs as well. You see that a lot. Sometimes you see it with boys' academies. They might get a player in just for a session. That's changed slightly in the last few years, whereby now it's more of a 6-week block or a half-term block, whatever it might be, something like that. Maybe they go into a development centre and these pre-academies now for a few weeks or a couple of months. They're assessed and then they go from there. So that's sometimes a little bit more of a longer trial. What we'd say before the trial, regardless, that first session, whether it is a 6-week block or one-off, is try not to put your player under too much pressure. If you're a player listening to this as well, try not to put yourself under too much pressure. See it as another training session. Okay, you just go in to play some football. If you start putting a bit more pressure on, then that's when you're going to have your player trying a little bit too hard or perhaps getting too nervous and not playing their game. The reason that they're at this trial, if they've been picked up by a scout, is because that scout believes they've got something. If it's a case of they're open trials and you're taking your child along to try it, then the last thing that you want to do is for them not for those coaches to not have a fair reflection of your player, of your child. So if you put them under too much pressure and they don't play their game that they play every single week otherwise, then it's a wasted opportunity. So no pressure would be the first thing. It's just another training session. That leads on to their game, and what we'd always recommend, and certainly if it was my daughter when she's a little bit older, is just to play their game. Don't try and be something that they're not, because they'll get found out further down the line. If their game isn't trying to beat 3 defenders and put it in the top corner, then don't try to get them to beat 3 defenders and put it in the top corner at the trial if they've never done that before, if that's not their game. If their game is being a great defender, good tackles, winning the ball, playing it, that's what they need to do. That's their game. We'd always recommend just keeping it simple, certainly for that first initial period when they get there. Don't try too much, just get the ball and play it. Do the basics very, very well. Then once they're comfortable, that's when they can maybe start showing a little bit more about what they're about, essentially. So maybe they are a bit of a dribbler. Maybe after a few touches just to get into it, they can then start getting on the ball and doing some of the dribbling bits or whatever it may be, showing their speed off, whatever. But I think certainly initially you just want them to settle into it. The last thing that you want is for them to have a few poor touches in those first 5 or 10 minutes. Certainly when I was a player, when I was playing matches, those first 5 to 10 minutes were really important for me, because if I got my foot down and played and kept the ball, that set the tone for the rest of the game for me. And it was the same for a lot of our players. If I tried a bit too much, tried a few long passes, a couple of shots, whatever, and it didn't go according to plan and I gave the ball away, that's when I'd start trying a bit too hard and then my game would just plummet. The same is for trials. If you can get on the ball and just play basic, short passing, get it to feet, keep possession, just build up a little bit of confidence in those first few minutes, that will set the tone then for the rest of the trial. Certainly that's how I'd probably approach it if it was me trialing, or if it was my children trialing. That's certainly what I'd be recommending those first 5 or 10. I'd also say control what you can control. And what I mean by that is, these environments are not nice, okay? So they're not going to roll the red carpet out to trialists. It's not how it's done. They're putting you into an environment whereby everybody else, regardless of whether they're in the team or not, know that you're there to take a place, okay? So if they don't know you, don't expect them to pass to your player. Expect physicality. We'll talk more about that in a second. Your player is essentially going to have to earn the right to play, and they're going to have to show what they can do with knowing the fact that they're probably not going to get a lot of the ball, or certainly, they may not get as many passes as they do at their grassroots team. At their grassroots team, they might be one of the better players, so therefore the ball will gravitate to them a little bit more. In these environments, everybody's there to impress, or some of the players are there already in the team, in the academy, whatever, and they know that your player's there to take their place. So they may not receive the ball as much as they would like, or as much as they're used to. So when we say control what you can control, what that means is certainly how much effort they put in, but then it's also looking at things like, okay, I'm not getting a lot of the ball, but what can I do to stand out off the ball? The coaches and scouts, if they've got anything about them, will be looking at what you're doing on the ball, but also what you're doing off the ball. When my team's attacking, am I providing an option? When my team's defending, am I getting back in, getting compact and helping out the defence? If I lose the ball, am I running back and am I trying to defend? Am I helping my teammates out? So control what you can control. And the other things that I'd add to that are things like leadership, communication. So you might not be seeing the ball, you might not be having the best of games, but you can always control your voice. So they can control organisation, they can control encouragement and praise. It's a brilliant thing. A lot of people, people want nice environments, nice teamwork, good teamwork, should I say. So people that, players that are encouraging and praising, well done, great work, blah, blah, blah. That's going to also be noticed. I think that shows a good attitude. That's an easy thing. They just need to talk. They just need to open their mouth. It shows a bit of confidence as well, which is a key factor. And the other thing I'd say there is things like making the right runs. I had a player recently working one-to-one, great player. Her game was very much, she was speedy, and she made some great runs. On a grassroots day, they'd find her with passes over the top or whatever. At trials, she might not get that ball as much because people are going to possibly hog it a little bit more. But I encouraged her to try and make those runs, because if it's a good scout or a good coach who's watching, they should see her making those runs, and they should know that if she gets into the team, playing with better players that will be passing to her, because that's what they're going to be, it's a different environment then, they will find those runs. So if they see her making the runs, but it's just a case of the player on the ball's hogged it or isn't good enough to find her, they'll still be looking at that thinking, but what she did off the ball was great. So control what you can control, and basic things like that are your effort, your voice, the runs that you make. Easy stuff regardless of anything else that's going on around you. I mentioned it there about the passing thing, and I'll just talk a little bit more about that. We hear it time and time again. Players go to these trials, whether it be the blocks or the one-offs. Every other parent that has got a child at that session will have had conversations along the lines of, you need to show what you can do. The overzealous parents that we all know, and we all sort of, we talk about a lot on this podcast. It's not everyone. I'm not going to tarnish everybody with the same brush, but you're going to have a lot of parents that do tell their players to hog the ball, that do tell their players to try and impress and try do things that they're possibly not used to doing before. And therefore, that's going to mean your player's going to see less of the ball generally. It doesn't always happen, but it can. And I think as long as your player, or you listen to this as a player, as long as you're prepared for that, then you can deal with it. And then it comes down to your player earning the right. So are they going and winning the ball? Are they closing down and putting other players under pressure to win the ball back? And then they've got the ball themselves. They're earning the right to play. are they making the right runs so it becomes an impossibility not to be passed to, because it's just the right thing for those players on the ball to do. But I think if your player is understanding of the fact that, yeah, they might not see the ball as much, that's going to help them get less infuriated and frustrated, which can then lead to a bad trial because their head's just going to be in another place. If they know that they're unlikely to get passed to as much, they can start dealing with that a little bit more. And that's down to you, to how you sort of portray that to them. You don't want them to think that it's because they're not good enough. You just want them to understand that they're in a different environment. They're not in their own training session with their friends. These people don't know them, so they're going to have to go earn the right to play. Okay, that comes back down to the effort thing and doing that stuff off the ball that they can control to get the ball themselves and play. Physicality. This is one that I think does take parents aback a little bit. Let's talk about academies. So the traditional boys academy, your pro clubs, they're good players, but they're not just good players. A lot of the time, they are very physical players. Not in a bad way, not all the time, certainly, but they will go and put their foot in. They will go and use their shoulder. They'll go and use their body quite well. Maybe sometimes they will be a little bit late in challenges. It's because they're very competitive. They have a different mentality. Any player coming into that environment needs to be aware of that, because again, that can completely change a trial for a child. If they're getting knocked about all over the place and they're only used to the niceness of a grassroots training session with their friends, then it's gonna really impact them in those first sort of 5, 10, 15 minutes or so. They need to be made aware that it could get physical, okay? And that's not to scare them, that's just to make them aware of it. And stepping back a little bit from that, it might even be that, do you want to put your child into that environment? And this is not me saying that it's World War III. It's not, but they need to be aware that there will be some tasty tackles going in. There will be kids trying to win that ball, because they're the little competitors. They think you're there for their place. There might only be 1 or 2 places in this place that you're going to, in this club or whatever that you're going to, and they want that place. They would want to keep the place, or they want to get there first. They want to have their name shouted. That your player needs to be aware that they will probably receive a little bit of argy-bargy. It'll be done 9 times out of 10 in a fair way, but that's going to impact them. Looking at the girls' game, for example, a lot of the RTCs, a lot of the inverted commas girls' academies, they play against boys, whether that be a year or 2 younger or whatever, but they play against boys, and naturally then that game's a little bit more physical for them than it would be playing just against girls. So when it comes to the trial, if the trialists are going against the current RTC team that are used to playing against boys, and they're used to getting stuck in a little bit more, that can take the trialists aback a little bit if they see that they're a little bit more physical. But you need to prepare your child for that, because it's going to happen, and there aren't any friends. It's as simple as that. It's not a grassroots environment. It's a higher level. It's the next level above, in which case it's a bit more cutthroat, and yeah, they're going to have to go through a little bit of maybe getting hurt, maybe not being passed to, a couple of tasty tackles, whatever it is. That's just going to happen. But the coaches, again, of course, they're not going to allow any serious foul play deliberately, but they're going to let things slide a little bit, because they want to see how your child reacts to that. Do they throw the toys out of the pram and start stamping the feet? Do they start moaning to referees, to coaches? Do they retaliate? It's these things that they're going to watch out for, from that mental side of things, to see, could they handle the competitiveness and the environments that they might be going into at these higher levels. So definitely a few things there for you to think about before the trial, and just set the scene. It should be an exciting thing, and it is, but I think you need to get the best out of these opportunities, and I think that will come from preparing them in the right way without scaring them off. So your children better than anybody. That what we've just said there is how you then articulate that to them. So you've then got during the trial. Now, way back when, I was working in the development centre of a club, and we used to do 6-week trial blocks and things like that. And we had some great kids and some kids that, you know, thankfully are still in the academy and so forth and doing pretty well. But what we were also looking at is not just the child, it was also the parent. So I guess the easiest way to say this would be, unless your child is messy, then I don't think you'll get away with acting in a certain way on the sideline. You know, what I mean by that is like shouting needlessly, aggressive, all the things that we talk about on this podcast, instructing your player what to do from the second they get the ball. If a coach or scout sees that, then that might be the difference between your player getting picked and not. And look at it from a coach perspective. If a coach thinks that your player's pretty good, but parent is just going to be too much of a pain, then if it's the difference between you've got the same ability as another child who parent isn't like that, whose parent's just, you know, allowing them to play and leaving them alone, I won't mind betting who's going to get the nod. And I think that's probably the best way of saying that. We had it with the development centre stuff where, you know, there was a couple of players that you thought, yeah, you know, maybe could be all right, but then you look at the parent and think it's not going to work. Equally, it might be that if you have got a Messi, then yeah, maybe they'll sort of pay lip service to the parent and maybe educate them along the way as to how to behave on the sideline. But that's if you've got a Messi. The player's gonna have to be very, very good for them to, you know, for them to give you that nod essentially. So your behaviour on the sideline is important, and you don't want to put them under any pressure, as we said. So the last thing they want to see from your child, that is that your child doesn't want to see you getting animated on the sidelines. They don't want to see you constantly instructing them, telling them what to do. A bit of praise, absolutely fine. You know, well done, good work, whatever, absolutely fine. But our advice would just generally be, just be quiet. Just let them play. And I think a lot of the times now you are taken away from the pitch in some respects, but in others you're not, and you're there and you're around it. But it'd just be a case of let them play. And if you're one of those parents that knows they can't help themselves, I'd leave yourself in the car and do your best just to go on your phone and play some games for a little while, whatever you need to do to take your mind off from it. But believe us when we say that it can be a bad thing if you're a parent that is going to be a little bit overzealous on the sideline, shall we say. They will. Your child's probably not going to get much by way of coaching. So certainly for the one-off trials, but then sometimes even during these block trials, there's sometimes less coaching. It's more putting on activities and seeing how children react to them. It could be infuriating for parents because I think they come into these environments and believe that the child should be coached. But sometimes it's just a case of the coaches putting on activities that are going to test different things, and they want to see how the children react to it. So they might give them a few pointers here and there, but they want to understand their decision making. Do they get this? Do they understand what to do? Do they make the right decisions without me having to tell them? That's important. So don't be too disheartened if you don't get too much feedback. Too much coaching, should I say. It's just sometimes how it's done, particularly with the one-off trials. So at the time of recording now, we're in June. There's a lot of trials for the RTCs for the girls. These are one-off trials. You're not going to probably have any coaching points in those things. It's going to be a case of what positions do you play, off you go. So definitely prepare yourself for that, and don't be disappointed afterwards if you don't get much by way of coaching points and so forth. And leading on from that, feedback. It's unlikely you'll be given any specific feedback. There's a few years ago, there were a few reasons that came out for that, and I think it is because, you know, I think in a nutshell, football's so subjective. Everybody's got an opinion on it. The coach's opinion of your child's performance on that day might differ very, very, very much from your opinion of their performance or your opinion of them generally. So I think it's just a case of a blanket thing whereby it's a thanks but no thanks, and you know, we'll be in touch. In some cases, they'll say we'll come back out and watch you play over the course of a few weeks in grassroots and whatever, fine. And you might get 1 or 2 points, but just prepare yourself and your player for the fact that you might not get that. So, you know, that's just how it seems to be, and you can like that or lump that essentially. Afterwards, I think personally, it's just about praise. Did you do your best? Did you give? Are you happy with your performance? A few questions around, what could they done better? Anything that you do differently next time? Just particularly if they've got a few trials coming up, it's good for them to reflect on it a little bit. But getting on them if they've had a bad time it's not going to help them. It's not going to help them at all. So it's plenty of praise, well done, and even to get to this point is fantastic, or fair play to you for putting your name forward to go here. These sorts of things, but definitely get them to reflect on it. I think that's never a bad thing. It's never a bad thing after a match or a training session even. It's good for them to understand and them to think, well, what did I do well? What could I have done better? What might I do differently next time? Because they'll just start thinking about things. That helps their learning. So we've spoke about that before as well. But definitely have a little chat to them about those sorts of things. And then await the decision. You might get the decision there and then. You might get it in a couple of weeks, whatever. Good or bad, it's all experience, and that's the thing for them to understand, is that this is all about learning. It's either learning and then taking that and then moving to the next level, or it's learning and, okay, next time I get an opportunity like this, I know that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So that's what we do after the trial. The other, I guess, a little bit of an extra point here, and we're probably going to do a podcast on this separately, but it would be about positions. And we're big believers in children playing a multiple variety of positions, because from a game intelligence point of view, from a technical point of view, we think it develops them more than if they just put into pigeonholed into one particular position from 7 years old to 16. Now, if your child is used to playing different positions or is comfortable playing different positions, you can use that, or they can use that to their advantage when it comes to the trials. So I read a great thing recently about Casemiro, who the Real Madrid midfielder, defensive midfielder. I think he's won, it might be 5 Champions Leagues, whatever he's done, but he's playing at the top level. He was at Sao Paulo as a youngster, and he went there on trial, 300 kids. He went there as a striker, and he tells this great story that when the coaches said, right, who plays up front, who plays striker, 50 odd hands went up, okay? Who plays forward, attacking midfielder? Another 50 hands went up. Who plays defensive midfielder? 8 hands went up. And when he sussed that, he stuck his hand up for the defensive midfield role, because obviously he was a good player and he knew he could probably do that position, and it'd be seen a little bit more and there's less competition. So you can use those sorts of things to your advantage, and this will be something I speak about as well. I remember when I trialled for our college team, and I was a right back at the time, but I knew that there was certainly one and possibly 2 right backs trialling that were very, very good, that I'd played against in grassroots in my younger years. And from a selfish perspective, I was thinking, okay, well, what can I do here? This might come down to me being better than him on the day. Can I? I should maybe have backed myself. People might say that you should maybe have backed yourself a little bit and gone there, but in my mind, I thought, well, if I can tell these guys I can play 2 positions, that's hopefully going to open up a few more doors for me. So I put down on my form that I could play right back or left back. At the time, it was when there was just a very few left-footed players in England, it seemed. So the competition at left back was far less. I was right-footed, but I just spent a summer with the ball against the wall, getting used to hitting it with my left foot. I trialled and I got into the team, played a year at left back. I then went to my normal position after that, but it opened up more opportunities for me. And so what I'm getting at with this is that if your player can play a multitude of positions, if their main position is maybe a striker, but they'd also be pretty good on the right wing, then maybe put 2 positions down. If that's what the trial's about, if it is a trial where you put into positions. If it's a trial where they're just going for 6 weeks and they're put into different roles, fine. But if it's one of those where you've actually got to give them a position, then offering up a couple of options can be a way through. And then they've got, once they're in that team, once they're in that squad, that's when they can show what they can do in other positions as well. So a bit of a caveat there, but that's just maybe a little tip, a little hack maybe. But hope that all makes sense. And as we always say, and as I said at the start of the podcast, if you need any help in this, certainly our members come and talk to us. But it's just another training session. It's a good opportunity. They should be taken seriously if you are going for a trial. That's what it's about. But there's ways and means of them getting the most out of it and doing themselves justice. And hopefully some of those points there will help you navigate it. It can be tricky, it can be stressful, it can be upsetting, but equally it can be amazing. So good luck to anybody listening to this that is trialling. And as I say, for those parents that just do want a little bit of help and assistance, you know where we are. Thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.